Welcome back to the Pen and Reel Comic Reviews. I'm Uncle Joel. Today we're going to be talking about Dark Knight's Death Metal, issue number 2. Now, if you're coming to a review of issue number 2, I'm going to assume that you've at least read issue number 1. And so, for any reviews going forward, we're going to try to keep it spoiler-free for the issue at hand, but we're going to talk quite openly about everything that happened prior to this. And so, with that being said, I'm going to assume that you're familiar with in issue 1, the Batman Who Laughs being killed by Wonder Woman with the invisible chainsaw. And that you also caught the Watchmen references at the end, with the yellow frowny face button that Batmage pressed, and the appearance of a Dr. Manhattan. Because it's going to be kind of difficult to talk about this issue without talking about those. So in the last issue, we talked about the map of this version of the DCU Earth. And this one, we get a name for it. They call it the Metalverse. It looks even more like a bat symbol. The opening page, we get kind of a throwaway character, which is another version of Batman from the Dark Multiverse. And so, yet again, we see a new version of Batman with another superhero's powers. And again, like I said last time, I don't think this is inherently bad, but the way that it's being used, I don't like. Because what it's doing is it's taking what could be an interesting idea, and it's just throwing a bunch of it out there, and then quickly moving on without really delving into it or exploring it very much. So in this case, we get a Batman version of the Atom, and he calls himself the Batum, going for that clever pun. But then he's only on this one page, and it's clear that he's not going to be in the rest of the series. So for me, that really cheapens the idea. And now, I do think it works for this page and what it's trying to do, but I do wish that Snyder would tone it down a little bit so it wasn't just introducing a bunch of cool ideas and then throwing them away. So this issue picks up where the last one left off. Wonder Woman, Wally West, and Swamp Thing are trying to find Batman so that they can get a team together and can go into the multiverse and the Dark Multiverse and try to gather energy from different crises from the past, like Infinite Crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Final Crisis, and so on, and use that to reignite Wally West's Dr. Manhattan powers that he got in the Flash Forward miniseries. And it's in this pursuit of Batman that we get a couple of really good character moments, but unfortunately, we delve into one of Scott Snyder's big problems as a writer, is the dialogue-heavy info dumps. So much of this issue hinges on exposition. So while Scott Snyder does have a lot of interesting things to say, unfortunately he winds up making his characters tell the story rather than showing it. And so we get a lot of dialogue-heavy sequences that are telling you the story and that are telling you the setup rather than having us really experience it properly. Now, when we do finally see Batman, he is trying to put together a team to try to fight back against the Batman Who Laughs and ultimately Perpetua. And in some of the reviews that I've seen of this issue, I feel like they've all overlooked something very significant of Batman's planning. And part of that is, after you read this issue, after you read this sequence, think back to Batman's major moment in issue 1. So then we start getting a team formed, and we've got 2 different potential plans of fighting back against the Batman Who Laughs and Perpetua, and possibly going into the Dark Multiverse to get this different crises energy to reignite Wally West's Dr. Manhattan powers. So then we switch to the villain front, and we see the fallout of the things that happened in issue 1. Specifically, the death of the Batman Who Laughs, as well as the introduction of this Dr. Manhattan that the Batman Who Laughs had in captivity. And the way this sequence plays out has a lot of different mixed implications. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the first issue. It does feel like Scott Snyder is aware of what people are interested in, but at the same time, he doesn't care too much, as well as the way he introduces and throws away a lot of different ideas. And this sequence does both. It introduces some cool ideas, but then it also takes other ideas and it just kind of throws them out the window. So in a lot of ways, it feels like it was kind of pointless for him to introduce them to begin with. Now, it's possible that those ideas could come back later, but the way that it's done, it does feel like it's kind of final, like I introduced those characters to very briefly introduce an idea, and now that I'm done with them, I'm just going to throw them away. I don't really care about them anymore. And another concern I have with this series based off of just issue 2 is it feels like there are a lot of different moving parts, and I'm a little bit concerned with how well Scott Snyder is going to be able to pull them all together. So already I see at least 3 potential conflicts, and they've suggested that there could be more, but it's possible that those suggestions are just kind of meant to be red herrings, and they probably won't play out, would be my guess. But still, we've got the 3 main conflicts, and I can totally see those coming to a head in one major conflict, but we'll have to wait and see how that works out later on down the road. The way it plays out with that Dr. Manhattan that was introduced in issue 1, I'm not really a fan of. I feel like it has potential to do interesting things, but it's also getting a little bit too into the goofy side for me, and is developing things in a way that I don't care for too much, as well as it's making me question like the logic behind how some of that was introduced. So, for instance, in issue 1, it's revealed that the Batman Who Laughs had captured a Dr. Manhattan. But then the question becomes, how would he have captured a Dr. Manhattan? And the way that Dr. Manhattan is used in this issue, it just reinforces that question. And then the very final image for this issue is playing with something that has already been in the comics in the past, but is updating it slightly. And unfortunately, it's something that I didn't like when it was done previously, so I'm not really fond of it being here. And I feel like it just adds to what I was talking about of the goofiness, and it's supposed to be this big epic moment, but for me, it just kind of deflates the story for me, and it saps my excitement. So yeah, overall it is interesting, but I actually liked issue 2 less than issue 1, and my excitement for the series is definitely starting to wane. Hopefully the series starts to pick up a bit from here, but the way it's starting out, I have to say I'm not a fan. It'll be a real bummer if Snyder had this multi-year story that he was telling from Dark Knight's Metal to the Justice League run and then now Dark Knight's Death Metal, and it was interesting all along the way, and then it just stumbles at the finish line. That being said, we've only had 2 issues, and it's going to be a 6 or 7 issue series with multiple tie-ins that are designed specifically to fit in and around the story, as opposed to a lot of tie-ins where they just like rope in other series and force them into it. So I feel like those tie-in issues have a much higher chance of actually being interesting, kind of like the way it was done with Final Crisis. But yeah, I would say I'm hopeful for what's to come, but my expectations have dropped significantly. But yeah, join me next time where I will talk more openly about this issue and include spoilers for this issue, and I will give you my thoughts on issue 3 of Dark Knight's Death Metal. Until then, this is Uncle Joel saying, stay tangible.